think, Garrett, we can jump into our main topic of the day, which is going to be our first main topic. We have two, is travel, business travel versus personal travel. And what is the question we get all the time? Hey, going on a business trip, or I'm going on a trip, I'm going to be working. Can I deduct this travel?
Yeah.
Let's talk through that. Let's talk through kind of the considerations around it and, you know, what we generally respond to people. Obviously, this is going to be somewhat nuanced conversation because every person's scenario is going to be different. So we're going to talk through the different things we see and take it by that.
Yeah, I think a great way to look at it is, you know, when we get that question, it's like, hey, I'm going on this trip. What can I deduct? This and that. You know, immediately our mind, boom, right there. How's this happen? Like they ask us in Discord. So my first question back in Discord, you know, their question triggers 20 more questions from me. So my first thing
what is the most common accounting answer?
It depends.
It depends.
Yeah, that's
every
the first
time.
thing I say. It depends. Yeah, so I would say, okay, one, let's get down to it. Is this business travel or is it vacation? And if they don't know the difference, you know, when they phrase it to us, oftentimes, like I already kind of know in my head, but we don't make assumptions, right? So we ask questions. So when they say, I'm just going to Europe, like, okay.
What are you going to do in Europe?
Yeah, I need to know like the details.
Yeah,
you know?
sure.
But if they say like, I'm going to TwitchCon, is that deductible? That's much easier. Like we, you know, so that's kind of guiding our questions. But the first one will always be, is it business travel or is this a vacation?
Is it related to what you're doing for business? Which in most cases, in the context we're talking right now is, you know, content creators, gamers, people who maybe have YouTube or their revenue sources are generally through the content that they create. So that's how we're kind of going to tailor the answer is to those people.
So let's take a really, you know, let's take a specific example and say like a TwitchCon. We'll start with the pretty much 100%.
Shout out, we're going
travel.
to TwitchCon next month.
We'll be in TwitchCon next month.
1 month from now.
Yep.
So
if you're watching this, please come say hi. We'll be there walking around. So if we're talking about something like TwitchCon, for our content creators specifically, we know they're going to network. We know they're going to see, some of them have been asked to go to TwitchCon to
maybe they have sponsors there.
Sit on a panel. Like, yeah. So even outside of like Twitch themselves, like their sponsors are asking them to go to make face, all that stuff. So yeah, the first thing we're going to ask is like, okay, what cost are we thinking about? And then maybe even suggesting costs that they might not be thinking about. So we're talking about, and I'm going to read down a list here, but hotels or Airbnb, plane tickets, Uber rides while you're there, one-off subscriptions, which you brought up. What are some examples of like a one-off subscription you might pay for while you're going out there?
Yeah. So, I mean, you know, we have creators that might need to be editing content or, you know, uploading stuff. Obviously, they have to have internet to do so. You know, maybe it's a situation where they're paying for internet on the plane. Maybe it's a situation where they're, you know, at the hotel and they have to pay for better internet or private service internet to be able to, you know, to work. So stuff like that they're subscribing to, that is necessary for them to be able to work.
What about meals?
What about, well, so
you were going to put me on the spot. I wanted to hit you with it. What are meals necessary?
Yeah. So meals is somewhat of an area that we're going to kind of do what you said, which is target what meals are we talking about? Are we talking about meals from the second you leave your house till the second you get back? Most likely, probably not. It's going to be those meals that are basically surrounding any kind of business that you're doing. So if it's a situation where you're there to network, you're doing whatever, while you're obviously there at the venue, any of those meals would be deductible. If it's something where you are working for, you know, let's say the first half of the day, and then the next half of the day, you're there for personal reasons, you're doing personal stuff. No, you're not going to be able to go out to a nice restaurant and dinner and, you know, you by yourself or you and your wife and be able to deduct an expensive dinner because it's just not ordinary or necessary to your business. That being said, if you were to go do that same dinner and it was a networking thing, you were talking business with people, or maybe you're meeting up with a client there, or if you're a content creator, you're meeting up with other creators, maybe content's going to be filmed, then yeah, it would be deductible.
What if I took, so I have 2 mods for my channel. What if I took my mods to dinner to show them love for, you know, modding my channel in a volunteer type position? So I'm going to take them to dinner while they're at TwitchCon because we're all there. Could I deduct if I took my mods, like my staff, quote unquote? For
sure. And that'd be a perfect example of something that is related to your business that you can definitely deduct meals like that. I think a lot of people kind of go crazy with it. And when they say, oh, you can deduct meals, that means the second you leave your house to the second you get back. But in reality, most trips, there's going to be some personal time inside of that trip. And a lot of the trips that we're talking about with content creators, it's pretty much a half and half type thing. Because even at TwitchCon, you know, it's in Vegas. They're probably going to the casino at night. They're probably linking up with people hanging out. There's probably going to be personal time in there. Yep. So the number one thing that we try to consider and that we always kind of tell people is, what is the plan? What's the plan for the trip? And, you know, fancy word that we always try to use and something that we would even probably provide to the IRS if this was ever questioned is an itinerary.
Yep.
And so we're going to just tell them the best way to go about this. Hopefully the question's getting asked to us on the front end of the trip.
Not I went, and by the way, I just went on this trip. Can I deduct it?
Yeah,
right?
and I'll put all this on my business card. Yeah, hopefully it's on the front end. We're going to say, well, let's get it together an itinerary. And what we mean by that is let's figure out what the schedule is of when you're truly going to be working. Now, if you're going to be vlogging in and out here and there and it's intermittent, okay, well, let's at least put that on paper to where then we know any expenses surrounding those times that you're working should be deductible.
Yep.
Whether it, and obviously if it falls into this. If we have a scenario where the client it's more of a 50-50 situation, what we'll probably end up doing is figuring out some way to prorate some of these expenses 50-50. So if their hotel while they were there ended up being $1,000 over 3 days, we'll probably end up taking $500 of the hotel expense, not all of it, because 50% was work, 50% was personal.
I like what you said, prorate. That's really the key there is we're trying to delineate between the personal and the business. We're trying to delineate, by the way, write that down, big word.
If you're new here, we always have one big word
We
of
have
the
a
day.
big word of the day, so delineate is going to be that today.
How do you spell that, Garrett?
Don't ask me that. Delineate.
That's correct.
Jamarian, check that.
That's correct.
We're good?
I don't know.
So we're trying to figure out personal and business. We're trying to prorate between the two. So you're exactly right. And itinerary helps us do that. We're laying out ahead of time what we're going to be doing. Now, this doesn't mean it's the most rigid thing ever, because when you do go travel, things are going to happen that push, certain items are going to get pushed. And especially on a day where like you're going to work all morning, but in the afternoon you have some trip planned or some activity, whatever. It's okay. But what we need to at least have is some kind of schedule. We've got to show something. We got to be able to convince the IRS that there is a business portion to this. We were working. And I'm not talking about, I was working. No, I mean, like, we got to be able to show them, because the fact of the matter is, if we can't prove it, they're going to say it's not.
They're going to disallow it.
They're going to disallow it. And it is what it is. We have to be able to prove it. And it's not on them to prove that we weren't working. It's on us to prove that we were. And that does not mean just shooting a video one time and then being done. Like, no, like you can't get on your phone, shoot a 30-second clip and then say I was working all morning. Like,
well, and as our creators know, a lot of producing content isn't just the filming. There's so much that surrounds that. Even the creative aspect of figuring out what, the brainstorming session, maybe the flight out there when they did pay for the internet, maybe that was brainstorming to figure out what types of content they're going to film. All that stuff is considered work for a content creator. So, I think it's important to, as you said, ask targeted questions to make sure we're answering it correctly. And for anybody out there listening who's wondering, well, is my trip going to be or whatever, obviously feel free to drop a comment down below, but it's always going to be somewhat of a nuanced answer, because it's never just, write all of it off. Just, put it all on the business card, unless it's a trip that truly is 100% business. And, some creators do have those, most of the time not. And honestly, too, a lot of the ones we see that are 100% for business, usually people are actually flying them out and they're paying them to do it. So that's even more.
Especially with creators. Yeah, that's often the case. I'll give you one example, and then honestly we can move on if you're good with it. But one example, a real life example, is when we do go to TwitchCon, everything's being paid for on the company card, specifically because the company is paying for all of it. We're going to deduct all of it. The only thing, like we go back to, is the meals. When we get there and you, for example, want to go Chick-fil-A, we got any Chick-fil-A's in Vegas? I don't know.
I'm sure.
You want to go to a Chick-fil-A in Vegas, like you would have done that here all the same as you would do it there. So the IRS probably wouldn't allow that. So we're not going to cover if we do cover your Chick-fil-A, we're probably having some kind of meeting or something. But, in the morning, if you're hungry, you go get Chick-fil-A. Like, we're probably not deducting that. But that if we eat a meal later that night and we have, maybe potential clients or actual clients or whoever, we're trying to basically network with our clients or potential clients, then yes, we're probably going to deduct that, assuming we're footing the bill. Mm-hmm. So that's an example of the same rules that apply to creators apply to us too. Mm-hmm. Like, we'll be there, we'll be hanging out, doing all the things. So it's not just a consideration for our creators, and we're not talking like just saying these things out loud.
Right.
It's very much these are considerations we have to make for ourselves as well. So
for sure.
Yeah, that was all I wanted to say on that. I think you kind of hit the nail on the head with everything else though. I mean, travel in general, the itinerary is the big thing. Proration is the big thing. If it truly is just a business travel trip, don't forget to include things like the hotel, the plane tickets, Uber, and then the one-off subscriptions that you mentioned.
I would say this too, if you're a creator and you're taking a trip to, let's call it Greece, and it's going to be a $20,000 vacation, you're treating yourself and potentially your partner, somebody else, I would err on the side of just go. Let that be a vacation. Don't try to contact us and say, how can I make this deductible for business? Okay, I'm going to take my computer and I'm going to make an itinerary and I'm going to work every morning for 2 hours and so I can get a percentage deduction of this bill. That's not a business trip. Okay, that's not.
Yeah, stop forcing it.
And when you have that conversation with us, if you were to present that to us, to your point, you start asking questions to figure this out with the client. That's what we would tell you. We would tell you the same thing. If you're a paying client, we're going to tell you that exact same thing. Like, hey, is this really just a personal trip? If we're being honest here, and most of the time the conversation ends as, yeah, it is. It's like, okay, then let it be personal, because we're never going to try to push that with the IRS, because we know what happens when they come back and audit you. It's going to be on the client to start having to justify.
A $20,000 trip, like you deduct it and then it gets disallowed, and now you have to pay tax on the $20,000 that
and penalties and interest. Because
it's just not worth it, man. It really isn't. And it might be better for your business to not think about business, like to not do business while you're in Greece. Like, bro, go to Greece and have a good time. Like, relax, calm down.
And obviously we understand, as we just talked about, there is trips that end up being a little bit of both. Obviously probably even in Vegas for us for TwitchCon, I'll probably be working some there too. But I think most people try a little bit too hard to make a personal vacation into a business trip. And it's like,
so I agree 100%.